situation where you find that they look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, let's begin with the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. You'd find on page 20, World Bank to Nigeria and fuel subsidy in 6 months. And on page 24, Nigerians can survive for more years under APC PDP governors. And the Daily Trust newspaper is leading with the story, federal government punctures Lagos NSAS panel report, identifies 10 loopholes. One of the writers says it's a triumph of fake news, no massacre at Lekki Tollgate. Another writer is saying we are awaiting committee's report, Lagos government. You'd also find federal government not legally bound by panel report. That's according to SAN, and you're going to see an infographic there which shows faults identified by federal government on Lagos and SARS panel report. You'd also find on page 5 of the Daily Trust newspaper, EFCC grills Fani Kayode for forgery. And on page 6, reps pass bill to end HND degree dichotomy. You'd also see we can't control cooking gas pricing. That's according to the federal government. Boko Haram forcing parents to withdraw children from schools. Niger government says 151,380 villagers displaced in 30 communities. These are some of the stories on the Daily Trust newspaper.
All right, now let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper this morning, and the first story there at the top above the pictorial. FG Lagos hashtag NSAS report recycled fake news. Tales by moonlight. You'd find details of that story on page 2. EFCC arrest Fani Kayode over alleged medical document forgery. The lead story says doubts as FG plans to reimburse poor Nigerians cancel fuel subsidy. You'd also find the writers there saying petrol price to hover between 320 and 340 per litre. Also, El-Rufai states El-Rufai is saying that states will support total removal of fuel subsidy. NNPC GMD subsidy will be removed early 2022. Experts warn petrol equalization may truncate the regulation policy. Cash payment induces corruption. And also at the very bottom of the paper, you'd find the stories Senate deplores 6,000 feeding allowance of core members. Immigration yet to release orderlies seized international passport. ISWAP terrorists establish base in Niger border, says SSG. Service disruption trails protest against deplorable airport facilities. These are some of the stories on the Guardian newspaper this morning.
Okay, on the Nation newspaper, 2.3 trillion naira spent on cushioning COVID-19 effects. That's on page 6 of the Nation newspaper. APC reconciliation panel get 35 petitions. You'd also see federal government rejects Lagos NSAS panel report, says it's fake news, waste of taxpayers' money. You'd also see petrol to sell for 340 naira per litre next year, says Kyari. Labour cautions government against unilateral action. Another rider is stating 5,000 monthly stipend for 40 million Nigerians. These are some of the stories. On
all right. On the Punch newspaper this morning, the lead story, you would see the hashtag NSAS. Amnesty, others knock FG as lie rubbishes Lekki massacre report. You'd also find the writers there saying panel wasted taxpayers' money with nonsensical report, says Lai Muhammad. There's general conclusion in Nigeria that minister is an unrepentant liar. That's according to rights activists. You'd also see at the very bottom, EFCC deepens orderly's 100 billion naira scam probe. NIS holds onto passport. My father never recovered from NDLEA ordeal. That's Babasue's son. DSS contests 20 billion naira fine on Igboho, says detainee undergoing extradition. Well, these are the stories, the major stories on the Punch newspaper this morning. Well, let's get perspectives to these stories. Again, welcome to the show, our reviewer, Mr. Sunday Micheal. Now, let's get your thoughts. You know, the hashtag NSAS panel report is all over the place. Virtually all the papers have that story, you know, on their front page. The federal government, we are seeing its response for the first time since the leaking of that report. A lot of controversy here and there. People are saying this and that. We've seen even members of the committee to say, look, this report shouldn't have, you know, been leaked. You know, it's probably a draft, you know, from one of the, you know, drafts that they were doing. And it appears that we are taking it seriously, even the federal government.
Quite a number of interesting revelations. Yeah, so it's clear that what we see in the public domain is not the actual copy that went to government, not because the contents vary so much. So when you begin to say the report is not signed, obviously if you see a draft copy, it will not be signed. Only authorities like the Lagos state government can ascertain stuffs like that. However, there have been a number of contentious issues. The worry for me as a Nigerian is the multiple languages that seem to be coming even from the federal government, right? So the American Secretary of State come calling and you say you are waiting to see the outcome from other states so that you can harmonize views. And then additionally, the spokesperson of the president, which is basically the president talking to us, coming out to say whatever comes out of the report that is the responsibility of the federal government will be taken on by the federal government, and whatever is supposed to be within the purview or jurisdiction of the state governments will be taken. And then 24, 48 hours later, another government functionary who is the Minister of Information then comes out to rubbishes. So you begin to wonder, what's the meaning of these multiple communications coming from one source? You know, begin to pick hold. Well, whatever he has said seemed to have been in the public domain in the last 2-3 days. So basically, the government just adopted what appears to be positions that people had put in the public domain to say, yes, for this XYZ reason, these are fake news. But, you know, experts have said it's a judicial panel of inquiry. It was legally constituted by a legal government. And so, obviously, you cannot rubbish the outcome of a judicial panel of inquiry and just discard it with the wave of fake news. That is too weighty. It calls the credibility of all the people who had served in this system to question. You may disagree with outcomes, you know, but to then put everything in the annals of in the trash, as if to say the work that had gone into these places were complete waste, is where some of us find very harsh, you know, whatever that response is. But what cannot be discarded is that there are gray areas in the report, but I don't think it completely rubbishes the findings of the report. I think we could still find very useful, because some of the things the committee reports are recommending are not anything special other than apologize to the family who have suffered this loss, or even pay compensation. We know people suffer loss, whether directly at the scene of the shooting or as a consequence of the events of October 20. The shops that were looted in Lekki, the jewelry shops and all of that, were because of the anger that sprouted from what appeared to be a shooting. And that led to the attack even on the media houses like TVC. You know, the media also had its own fair share of those attacks. Those are properties that were lost, not because the guys participated directly at But because it was a vicarious liability as a result of the action that happened there, and they are a member of this society, they deserve some level of compensation. So we cannot discard those kind of recommendations, because there are other aspects of the recommendations that we don't like.
Okay. Now, one of the writers, on the Daily Trust newspaper, in regards to that, says federal government not legally bound by panel report.
Yeah. So there are two things. If you recall the Oputa panel report, some very strong persons in these countries were summoned, and they didn't show up, and they went to court instead. And the pronouncement of the court was that because it was a federal government constituted panel, it wasn't binded by the states, except if they were set up in the state and they were sitting in those states. And in fact, the things they did within the states are not legally binding. So if you extract that pronouncement into this, because this was set up by Lagos State government to act on an action that happened within Lagos State, the Lagos State government does not have the authority, for instance, to pronounce any punishment on the army because it's a federal institution. And this committee or panel was not set up by the federal government that has jurisdiction over federal agencies. So to a large extent, what we are likely to see, if the white paper report, which will be like a recommendation of what the government will do, comes out, it will be around what the state government can do. At best, they can only recommend to the federal government what they think would be appropriate on the part of the federal government. So to that extent, you can say, yes, it's not binding on the federal government, but we are all part of the same country. Whatever is good for Nigerians in Lagos State, I think should something the federal government want to take.
All right. Now, looking at our track record in Nigeria with committees, panels, and all of that, this is not the first of the panels that we've seen in Nigeria's history. And how important, is the response of government to panel reports to the confidence of Nigerians? Whenever government says, okay, we are setting up a committee to investigate, we are setting up a panel to look into this or that. Recall that when even the federal government came out to say, look, we have heard you loud and clear during the NSAS, protests and all that. We've heard you loud and clear. We are going to take actions on this. A committee is going to be set up to look into this. The protesters were skeptical about leaving the streets, which is to say that the words of the government doesn't hold water. With this happening, going forward, how would this tell, on, the idea about setting up committees for investigation on issues?
I have been in 2-3 other meetings that has tried to put the whole conversation in context. The truth of the matter is that there is little or no confidence about government committees. And I would advance this argument even with the reaction of a senior advocate of Nigeria who is a member of the panel, Adegborua. Adegborua himself said that it is not right to describe the activities of the committee as a waste of time. However, he doesn't think the effort of the committee will see the light of the day. He expressed the same fears himself. So basically what he meant was, we had to do this because duty calls. We want to put something in the annals of history, but that is all that there will be to it. It would not see the light of the day. And he gave instances, and those instances are readily in the public domain. Where is the recommendations? Where is the effort around, let's say, the Oransawe committee that said we are spending so much, which will harmonize agencies that seem to be doing the same thing? It's been in the trash can. What have we done with the Oputa panel recommendation? It's been in the trash can. The 2014 confab that was supposed to unite us as a country, maybe not address all the issues, but made far-reaching recommendations about how certain things needed to be done, is in the trash can. The government has become an expert, in setting up committee, wasting everybody's time, and trashing the outcomes of those committees. So if another person comes and an agitation continues, he sets up another committee that ends up replicating what has been said 5-10 years ago, and then we trash them. You know, we never seem to learn. If you recall, we are where we are today as far as security is concerned, for instance, because people wrote reports that were never read. People made recommendations to government that were never taken seriously until what happened? What was a small sect of 5-10 people meeting in places and preaching ideologies that were dangerous, metamorphosized into an elephant in the room. And today, we don't even know what to do with it. There were reports, there were evidence that reports were made to appropriate quarters that were never acted upon. So we seem to have a culture of really never taking these things, or we deliberately set these committees up to fail, as it were. I think we just respond to public outcry to set up committees. And okay, let us even leave the panel report. What about the ones that the government themselves established? At least we did a report and several other people, and the government confirmed that a number of police personnel lost their life in the endsars. What has happened to the family of those personnel? They said they were coming up with SWAT. Have you seen SWAT anywhere on the streets? Those were their own recommendations. They said things they themselves wanted to do to pacify the youth. What have you seen? Everything was in the heat of the moment, and today we are talking about 2023.
Okay. You know, another story of interest to me on the Daily Trust newspaper is a story about Boko Haram forcing parents to withdraw children from schools. That's according to the Niger government. And we're seeing this as another attack, you know, just recently happened on the Abuja-Kaduna highway simultaneously. What are your thoughts about this?
We were just mentioning before we came live that some of us had engagements that would require us to go through that road, and today we are putting off. That is even a social engagement. I am sure it will be the same line of decision for people who conduct businesses across these two locations. What is even becoming dangerous is this federal government seeming silent on everything that is happening in Niger. The Niger thing has continued to escalate in the last 2 years. You know, killing here, picking there. Today, 6 local governments, critical local government, about 4 or 5 of them are adjoining Kaduna. So you can see where there is a massive force. Because, of course, if you shell in Kaduna, they will run into other places and regroup. And these are all vulnerable spots. But the most painful revelation now is they are coming as far as Lapai. Lapai is just a few distance away from the federal capital. It's a strategic logistic route for trailers and tankers that go to the west, either evacuate fuel or other critical food supplies to both the nation's capital and other parts of the country. And we are watching these things creeping gradually. The painful part is the Kaduna road. The same spot, 3 days. They come out at a particular time, hold. In fact, testimonies, you know, suggest that this operation go on for as long as an hour without response. The videos we saw purportedly were coming from security personnel that were escorting apparently a VIP that needed to respond. It wasn't because we have created any kind of sustained attack on these people to wake them up. And you know, every time these guys come out and they succeed, it's become an impetus to even do more. It's not enough to say, then you see the government saying we have repelled attacks on it. What do you call repel? You know, people group to carry havoc. You come, you shoot to the air, they run into the bush, and then you count that as a success. What happens to combing, you know, to going after these people and flushing them out, you know, in the real sense, rather than just show up, do some show of force, and then they excuse you, which is the wise thing to do. He who fights and run away lives to fight another day. You know?
All right. Well, very interesting stories, really. We hear about, you know, federal government talking about removing subsidy, you know, by next year. It's also another story that surfaced here. And we also see another one saying, federal government saying that they cannot control the price of cooking gas. Yesterday, we saw in the United States, President Joe Biden took some emergency steps, you know, to control, you know, the pricing of energy over there. What do we need to do differently? I mean, we've been on this for quite a while. And if government is saying that they cannot even control the price of gas, what do? We should keep on buying as it is.
As a student of communication, I know how important positive communication is, especially from leadership. The only instrument you and I anchor on is hope. And so if people claim to lead us, they cannot at any point in time communicate as though the situation is helpless. No situation is completely helpless if you are willing to act as a leader. So what do you mean by there is nothing you can do about the price of cooking gas and you are a gas producing? You are not just a gas producing nation, you are one of the top gas producing nations in the world. What do you mean? What kind of confidence do you want your citizens to draw from that? Have you sat down and done your maths and imagine what 2022 would look like? Increase electricity costs. Today you are buying a cooking gas from 4,000 to 10,000. Likely you are going to buy petrol for 340 naira per liter. And remember that part of your energy needs in your house are supplied by your generator. And so what should have given you 2 or 3 liters today would give you just about a liter. And transport costs will go up. Food prices have surged beyond imagination. Breads are now selling for 700 as against 400 naira. If you accumulate all of these costs and you are looking at minimum wage that has refused to take you home, what is the plight of the average home? We are talking about increased hunger, stunting for children who cannot get proper food. Some families will respond by even removing children from school and say, if we can feed you, we have done the best for you. We can't do beyond this. Those are the consequences. And then we come out and communicate these things like it really doesn't matter. Look at the issue of subsidy. Yeah, the manner in which we have subsidies today are riddled with corruptions. Given. But what is this response about sharing 5,000 for 40 million people? Do we even have a social register that suggests that one or two persons are poor and the other persons are not? Is that even sustainable? So how can you be running from subsidy and be talking about palliatives that we know have never been shared fairly in this country? What happens to providing a transport system that provides opportunity for everyone to ride on? So what happens to the Abuja mass transit bus, for instance? I don't see them on the road anymore. What happens to resurrecting stuff like that from those kind of channels you can then, properly put out subsidies, like because you have provided mass transit buses that are competing with every form of transport, where you should go with 1,000 naira, you probably go with 100 naira. That makes sense. Rather than all the social sharing program you have run have come under massive corruption and massive transparency issues, and then you are instituting 5,000 naira for 40 million people is 200 billion naira per month. That was 1.4 trillion naira annually. Are we not back to the same thing? Mm-hmm. So it sometimes it beats your imagination whether people even sit and think about these things before they bring them out in the public domain. We are saying this basket you are spending on what you call subsidy that we don't understand is too much. And then you come up with another name and redesign the sharing of that money in another formula. When we are saying hospitals are becoming expensive, there are no drugs in the shelves, people are even withdrawing from public schools to private schools because it's completely in a state of comatose. Rather than pump money to those things that can impact everybody, we are sharing 40 million to 40 million faceless people. That's crazy.
Very sad, really. Quite a lot of stories that we have today. Now we hear also another story about Fani Kaide being picked by the EFCC. Again, it's like this has happened before a couple of times. And then somehow we hear that nothing happens at the end of the day. Why do we go this route all the time?
Nigeria is an interesting debacle. So today the EFCC is saying the documents he provided with which he sought leave from the court were fake documents. But what should surprise you and I is, why did it take this long to even confirm that a document is fake? He procured them purportedly from the Kuba General Hospital and the Federal Staff Hospital here in Jabi. What does it take? Why would it take this number of years to basically just certify whether a document originally came out from these places or not. Because if we were proactive with these things, he had sought leave with those things, carrying out this kind of due diligence would have taken nothing. We take forever to prosecute corruptions, let's say of $1 billion. We end up probably even spending more than $1 billion to nip those in the bud. And you wonder whether the effect, is really there, because justice delayed sort of is justice denied. Because with every day you wake up, there are more issues to be looked into, more grievous maybe, more substantial, the volume even more bigger, that you begin to lose steam about something you should have nipped in. These things are about the time that these guys served in government. There had been series of administration after then. It was in the Obasanjo's era. There had been a Jonathan 5 years. There is a 6 or 7 years now 6 years of the current administration. It makes it completely uninteresting, regardless of the drama that surrounds it.
So now,
Right.
His sins have not been forgiven. After all, just like many Nigerians will say.
These things don't go away easily, especially if you continue to even remain in the corridors of power. It seems like once in a while they look around and say, no, we have not been in the news for a couple of days. We need to tinker here and shake there. And these are like low hanging fruits. They don't, for me, they don't seem to cut it, honestly. As interesting as it may seem, because he was a former minister and all, and the kind of people that also attached to the case, like Nanedi Usman, who was a former finance minister, but that it has dragged this long has robbed it of the shine.
One other story that got my attention on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper is the one talking about the bill to end HND degree dichotomy. I think that we have been having this conversation for as long as I can remember, and it seemed to be stalled somehow. Is this really a problem, and why do we need to urgently look into this?
Funny, we've been having it for a while. It was a challenge for me some 21 years ago, while I was having my HND program. And it has always been there. At every point in time, it looked like we are going to fix this, then we end up not fixing it. We are a country fixated on empty ego, really. What's the essence of setting up a structure if you don't want to recognize it anyway? And the people we seem to have borrowed this whole culture from had modified, had moved on. We just ain't moving on. You have designed an educational curriculum that specified different level of competency and training. And so you said the guy in the Polytechnic is a hands-on person. So he goes and trains on how to do certain things with his hands by himself, rather than just concentrating on the theories. And then he comes out and you are finding it difficult to recognize the same skills that you have certified by your own laws. It's funny. Or that he gets into the civil service and you say because he's not holding a different kind of certification, he's pegged. That is regardless of his outcome or input or excellence on the job. You peg him. And so why people basically then look at what they are holding as something that limits them rather than open up the opportunity for them. In my own case, I had an HND with a 2-1. Then I am forced to go back to university and do a BSc I really never needed, that never gave me any extra knowledge other than what I had, just simply because I didn't want somebody to look down on me. And even prior to that, I've done an MBA and MSc, coming tops in my class with an HND knowledge, and yet it's a problem in a workspace by somebody else who doesn't even understand the kind of training that I have got. So the efforts have been here and there. Some persons come, give it momentum. At other points, it's just like with the difficulty we had with the Nigerian Law School, finding it difficult to recognize results issued by open universities. When all of the lawyers we had in this country, pre-independence and up to the 1970s, were sitting in these countries taking law classes in London by what they call correspondent courses. It was when they went to the law school. I mean, it was when they qualified and they got passed. They all went into, and even came tops in the law school. So is it really about sitting in the four wall of a classroom and getting somebody pass the knowledge for you, or it's about really demonstrating that you have this knowledge and you can stand up to whatever kind of scrutiny that is put before you? So we have had people who had made themselves lord onto the system, who keep beating their chest and saying, as far as we are here, these things don't happen. In other economies where we have borrowed these things, to even avoid this kind of things, they simply just change the nomenclature. So rather than call it HND, why don't you call it BTech, a Bachelor of Technology, which is the area, and then become more stringent with your supervision to ensure that the polytechnics are not offering management courses that they are not supposed to offer anyway. Leave that to the universities. Concentrate, because those are the real missing links in what we need to move this economy from where it is to another. We need to be producing. We need the industries to work. We need our technologies to compete with whatever it is outside. And if you want people to take ownership, then you must recognize them. Today, the guys in Yaba who are coming out with programs that have been bought over by players in the Silicon, who is asking them what qualifications they have? They sit on YouTube, learn programming language, design programs, and as long as it brings solutions, people are buying them off. Have we also forgotten the story of how MIT, one of the best universities, came to be? It came from a workshop, churning out tools, specific tools that were not available in the market. And because it became a specialized skills, and you can't find anywhere else, they needed to recognize them in their own form. Every profession came from a crude form before it became refined and they attached some kind of certification to it. So why are we finding it difficult to transition? Well, okay. I want to commend the government again, because some agencies have also made it a duty to normalize it. The Ministry of Interior, Customs, Civil Defense and the rest have been normalizing all the people they took in on HND that they have dropped a level or 2 levels, in fact, behind their contemporaries. They've raised them up. So it's something that probably would require a bill to then force people to. There are institutions and banks, let me not name names here, that you will even see their vacancies telling you that the only thing they need is ABC and X. They don't even want people. Then they take people at that kid there, put them into contract and stagnate them for another 10, 15 years. But giving you optimum service, and you run every time to declare that you are the best bank because you have the best workforce and you are making XYZ money. But people don't get commensurate remuneration for the efforts that they put in. So it's a big issue.
Now, what is dragging this bill, from coming to pass? I haven't been in the National Assembly, I believe, for years. Do you think that there's an elitist factor here that is playing? Absolutely.
How else do you describe it? All these are elites, travel everywhere. So today, if you go to Malaysia, Singapore, or the UK, or even Canada, you will see names like the Polytechnic University. They describe them out because that is the institution that produces middle and high-level manpower in technical skills. But if recognizing them in their form would make them feel inferior, let us change that impression in the psyche of our people, because we need that input to drive our economy. So with your HND certificate, you can proceed to your PhD programs. The roots are there, rather than making somebody feel like you have not done anything in the last 4 or 5 years, so you have to go back again and do. Do you know that in the UK, you can actually become a graduate without stepping into schools by just taking certification? So accountants can walk up into accounting firms as draftmen, and they start showing them the rudiments, on how to work on a ledger, on how to do this. And they take certification exams around those things, and they are certified. And they move on until they get an ACCA, which is the equivalent of somebody who had gone to the 4 walls of the classroom and studied back to back for 4 years to come out with the same certification. We have only used different routes to it. So the mechanic guy who shows up in the workshops and watch his master for years disassemble an engine and reassembles them and work on worn-out parts and replace them and troubleshoot a vehicle and dictate a fault and fix it back on the road, and it works perfectly. And in some cases, fabricates parts that are not readily available and fix them, and they serve. Can you honestly call that The only difference between him is probably doesn't have skills in contract negotiation. He doesn't have the capacity to read an agreement and understand it. Basically those are the things. So if any kind of course brushes up those basic contract negotiation skills and basic literacy and numeracy, would you rather not give your car to that person than give it to somebody else who can tell you everything that happens to your car but cannot pick a spider and hit one part of it? So why are we finding it difficult to recognize that guy?
Right.
This is what this whole argument is about.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the program this morning. It's been quite insightful, giving us perspectives on the show this morning.